Members, good afternoon. This is the reconvened meeting of the Audit, Governance and Accounts Committee for Monday the 24th of June. We didn't quite finish our business that day, so we are back today to complete our agenda, hopefully. Before I start, I will run through the normal protocols, which is to remind you that this meeting is being webcast. Also to remind you of our fire evacuation procedures. We don't have any alarms planned, so in the event that a fire alarm does take place, please evacuate the building in an orderly fashion through the marked fire exits and congregate in the entrance to War Memorial Park. I do have apologies for absence. I've got Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Mrs Cubitt and Councillor Gurdon at the moment who've sent their apologies. I don't have resignations and replacements unless you can advise me otherwise. Nope. Councillor Keating?
I just wanted to record for the minutes that I wasn't present at the earlier part of this meeting, but I have no hesitation in being here for this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keating. That's a good prompt because neither was I, but I'm back now. Thank you. Just to remind everyone that there are declarations or conflicts of interest to be expressed. Councillor Leake?
If we're discussing the accounts, are we? I can't remember. Sorry.
Yes.
My son works for PricewaterhouseCoopers, and then on Treasury Management, my daughter-in-law works for KPMG.
Sorry. Thank you, Councillor Harvey. You saved me from making a jibe. Go on, carry on.
No, if anything relates to the local plan at all that you raised, drafted in all committees, I have a personal interest in 3 particular sites. It's on my register of interests, and I would advise members to look at that if they want to go any further.
Thank you, members. I'll remind you at various points, the declaration of interest is entirely a matter for your conscience. So thank you for disclosing that. If at any point during the meeting you have anything further to declare, please feel free and we'll deal with it there and then. Thank you. That takes us on to item 12, which is paper B of the original agenda. Just to remind you, that's the paper that's covering the local code of corporate governance and annual governance statement for 2012-13. If you need a spare copy of papers, they're on the table. There's probably a ploy there. Not that I was to cast any aspersions. If it helps members, could I introduce the where I think we are with this? I understand at the previous meeting there was considerable discussion both around the code of corporate governance and the annual governance statement, and the upshot of that was really that it was felt that some members needed the benefit of an informal session with the officer team to understand the thrust behind some of the comments and also deal with some of the drafting that wasn't particularly explicit in the original draft. That meeting took place, and Kevin has the benefit of taking those changes on board. I'm going to ask him to quickly summarise the sort of substantive changes really to, first of all, the corporate governance code, and then we'll come back and deal with the annual governance statement. But my understanding is that providing we are comfortable that the drafting notes reflect your substantive points at that informal meeting, then we should be able to move quite quickly to agree the code today. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Having participated in the informal meeting, and you're referring to drafting notes, I had rather thought we would have had something now in front of us already that was a summary of the agreements that was held and arrived at that informal meeting.
Councillor Harvey?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just trying to bring up Laura's email because I know Laura sent an email round that covered those points. But again, it's not having the copy in front of me this afternoon. None of us, I don't think, got the email in front of us this afternoon just to cover your points, Laura. Which is Stuart's point, so I support Stuart in what he's saying.
Chairman, through you. Yes, members, I did send you an email. That was more in respect of the annual governance statement, though, but I have copies for you here, so absolutely happy to share a copy of that email with you. I think Kevin has got some text. Have you got anything that's copyable, Kevin? Or
Yes.
would that be helpful? Shall I?
Something to take away.
Right.
Yeah, what I wasn't proposing to do was go through the variety of changes that were just wordsmithing, but to actually pick up and ask Kevin to introduce the 4 substantive points, which I think were agreed as more sort of in principle changes that brought clarity to the report. So as soon as Kevin's back, we'll pick up on those, and then as Laura suggests at the next item, the second part of this paper, we'll then pick up the suggested changes and incorporation of the EY recommendations. So just bear with me and talk amongst yourselves for a minute, but remember you're still on webcast. Actually, members, while we're taking a second, can I give some advance warning that in our pre-meeting for the agenda for September, we've identified a long list of 10 items for the next meeting, some of which were carried on from a previous ARGA. The items, if I just run through with them, it's the substantive annual governance statement, the PwC audit report, statement of accounts, which are 3 substantive items which have to be dealt with in September. We then have the Medidown financial summary report and webcasting report, which were held over from the previous meeting. The electronic document management report, those 3 items are items that are directly related to actions coming out of the EY recommendations. So I'm keen that we deal with these this side of Christmas at very least. We then have the risk management strategy, in our normal internal quarterly audit update, and then both the Treasury Management Monitoring Report and Treasury Management Strategy Report. So they are 10 quite substantive items, but I don't feel it would be appropriate to try and get through them in one meeting. So what I'm doing at the moment is proposing that we schedule another meeting end September, early October. At the moment, the favoured date is perhaps the 7th of October. So if I can ask you to look at those in your diary. No? You're away. Well, the only other one would be the 30th September, and then there are others are away as well. Away, look, fine. So both dates don't work for you. Fine. Okay. So let's see how we get on with the 7th of October. My hope then is if we get ahead of ourselves with the October and November meetings, we might decide to do something with the December one. But I'm keen that we deal with the Treasury Management Strategy and the monitoring reports and the other substantive items rather than run into Christmas and then suddenly find we've got ourselves a backlog. Clearly, with members who are not able to attend that additional meeting, then we'll try and get some information out so you can feed into your comments ahead of then. Councillor Gardner.
Is the 7th of October proposed to be a continuation meeting?
No, what I'm suggesting is we actually schedule a separate meeting. So the 10 items that we've got potentially agenda for September, I'm going to split those in half with the guidance on when we need to do them. And I said the first 3, the governance statement, the PwC report and the statement of accounts, we have to deal with in September. And then certainly earlier sight on the Treasury management items would be better rather than, well, just taking on board this committee's comments last year. We didn't feel we had enough time to deal with them when they arose on the agenda in February, so it'd be helpful to get them in to the autumn, and then we've got a chance to consider and influence before we run into Christmas. Okay.
Yes, so as the Chair said, this was around the first part of the two parts that are in the paper, and most of the discussion was around the annual governance statement, but the paper I've handed out just highlights 4 key areas of drafting change that I wanted to go through. The first one on page 16 of 282, which is on the introduction, and that was just a deletion in section 3. Section 1, little 3. So the removal of will continue to be, so it reads, the continued corporate governance and identifies arrangements that have been made or need to be made to ensure effective implementation and application in all aspects of the Council's work. So that was the first item. The second one was on page 20 of 282, and this one will be reflected elsewhere where possible throughout the document, but that was a general comment around trying to make it explicit for us as a council, so where we've used executive or where the standard uses executive, where it's appropriate, reference cabinet or whatever the relevant element is. So in particular on that page, on page 20 of 282.
Yes, Councillor Keating.
Thank you. I had a previously marked issue about also the same type of issue about the scrutiny function being mentioned in here as the variation of the old scrutiny functions or the new variation.
Do you have an example?
To come out
Yeah.
of the, but if we haven't come to scrutiny yet, then by endorsing this, what are we endorsing? The old scrutiny or the new scrutiny?
Yeah. Do you have an example you can point us at in this drafting?
The alternative, Chair, is to remove the scrutiny references in here.
Please.
Thank you, Chairman. There are items in here, for instance, and the debate we had at the informal meeting was some of them are legislative words. So, for instance, the use of executive or non-executive, but members wish those to be changed to cabinet. Clearly, scrutiny has a particular definition, and our scrutiny role is currently undertaken in that overview and scrutiny function. But the debate that was held at the informal meeting and will be said now, and I will say now, is that some of the elements in this code are aspirational. So it may be this council's view that we don't as yet have a clear statement of a scrutiny function, but this is the code that is now valid for this financial year that we will be auditing against next financial year. So by the time this committee receives the next report on this item, there needs to be a clear statement of a scrutiny function, however this council determines to deliver that scrutiny function. So the words are right, we just need to then create the right context for the answer.
That help, Councillor Keating?
Well, the answer is no, Madam Chair, because a code of conduct or a code of governance is certainly not aspirational. Yep. It's factual and it's against criteria against what one has to comply. My reading of the phrases in here are the actual scrutiny functions, and you only ever have one criteria for scrutiny. You either have the old one and you get rid of it and you replace it. You cannot have more than one scrutiny function. If we're endorsing this, it's not an aspiration we're endorsing, it's the existing scrutiny function. Sorry for being, I don't mean to be awkward.
It's not been awkward, it's just trying, well, I don't think it's been awkward, I think it's trying to be clear. So yeah, Councillor Harvey, can you help and then I'll ask?
Thank you, Chair. Just a thought. Totally agree with where Kevin's going on the replacing of the executive. I have no issue replacing the executive full stop. On this particular point, in terms of adding something in, would it be relevant to have a little note at the bottom of the page, simply referencing what Laura has said? Because then we capture it. If it's going to be for the purposes of this year, if it is just for that time length, there's nothing to stop us saying qualification this, therein, we can look back upon it next year, having fulfilled that, hopefully, through the Constitutional Working Party and the appropriate... And we've captured it, and we're not lost it in the way that Councillor Keating is raising.
Yeah, I think there's helpful explanatory note to define it, so we are actually clear. Because you're right, by the time we get to next year and we're looking back, we might, yeah. Councillor Keating, is this a new point, or just...
No, it's
right.
it's the same point, only there are many references to scrutiny and variation there are within this particular document. So can I suggest that the comment that we're talking about should be referred to and other references to scrutiny in this document?
Yeah, I'm wondering whether it's an explanatory note right up front in the document. Yeah, that'll make sense, yeah. By scrutiny we refer to, yeah, okay. Kevin, if you want to continue?
Please chip in where there are things that I haven't captured that you wish to be captured. That's the whole purpose. So I was on page 20 of 282, and we just covered that. So replacing the word executive with cabinet where appropriate, and we'll now add that description that the scrutiny function is being reviewed up front in the document. I mean okay, but that's probably enough on that. Page 22 was my next one, and that was around supporting principle 5, little b, and that was just around some clarification of what was meant there, because it mixed in officers and members and remuneration, and really it was a replacement or a suggested explanation. So to say replace little b with set out the terms and conditions for remuneration officers, the members' allowance scheme, and the structure for managing the processes. Just to be for clarity, I think that was the gist of what members were saying on that one. And then the last one that I had, although as I say, please let me know if you think I've missed something, page 30 of 282. And again, this was around the wording in 7b towards the bottom, and that was to replace that little b with ensure that structures are in place for officers and members to support participation and development. And again, that was a discussion around that particular wording, and around career structures for members. I think was the discussion that was had.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. The only issue I've got with that, and I'm going to qualify that, it's not an issue. The only thought I have with that is the sense of the word development at the end there, because I do take on board what Councillor Mitchell was saying at the last of the informal meeting sat around the table, and what others said as well, about this formalisation of development for members. In this context, in our organisation, we've not gone down that road. So I know why you put the word in there, but I would not want it to be misinterpreted into members are now going to be developed, because that would be inappropriate. No, it isn't, John. No, it isn't. It depends what you're standing for as well, John. Some members need to be developed more than others, particularly if they're standing for the Welsh Assembly, but that's another matter entirely.
So we just keep to the point. Thank you.
I was wondering what you thought about that, Chair, you being a South Wales person and a North Wales person. Anyway, that aside, Chair, the point about development is nonetheless the key. Would Laura or Kevin just give me a view on, do you see it that way, or is it just a word in there that I'm reading the wrong way? Am I reading too much into it? Because there's no point raising it if that's the case.
Shall we take the comments first then? So, yeah, Councillor Parker, and did I see Councillor Keating? Yeah, Councillor Parker.
For my part, it was something that I spoke to particularly, was this business of the career, and I thought the general consensus of the discussions that we had at the informal meeting, Chair, was that it was an agreement that we were really wanting to ensure, A, that there was sufficient emphasis on sort of career track for the officers, we weren't trying to then put in place a career track for members, and development was in the context of training that members were required, and we were looking at some point to also give some increased emphasis on the committees such as development control, which Councillor Mitchell picked up, I believe, and was going to speak about at the next development control committee meeting, and licensing. So if there were development can be seen, I think, as training.
Happy to take Councillor Keating next. I was just going to say, what I seem to be picking up is that it may simply be trying to group officers and members together in the same phrase is not helping. So perhaps we need to be more explicit that it's around career structures for officers and the development they receive, and then a more specific bullet around ensuring that members have the appropriate knowledge and information and support to undertake the roles that they, that sort of approach. Councillor Keating.
My suggestion was that C be split into a C and a D. On page 30, top of the page, supporting principles, right? I said the previous page talks about developing the capability of people. That C should be read in relation to officers and cabinet, etc. And D, a new D, should talk about the provision of training, not the compulsory application of it, but the provision of training arrangements as selected by members to enhance their ability to be effective councillors. Pardon? Now, I know you don't want it to be effective, John, but we will.
Okay, can I suggest that I'm just going to have a go at that in a minute, all right? So while I think about that, can I suggest we park that couple of, because it's important we get that right, and I think if we can just come up with some words for sort of 6 and 7 that help us to close it today, that would be helpful. Just I don't remember them. But I will in a minute. So what I'm going to suggest is, can we just perhaps move on to the second recommendation of this within this paper, which is the I'll get to it. The annual governance statement. Because again, I believe there was some good discussion on that, and there was a need to include the specific reference to the implementation of the audit and governance, the Ernst & Young recommendations. Laura's had a chance to send out some words to you all for comment, and if we can perhaps just take those at the moment, and maybe if I just ask Donald to step in and help take some comments on that, and then I'll try and work on the words, the other ones, so we're not left holding. Laura, could you just introduce your words to the statement first, please?
Members, you had a discussion around some additions to make to the annual governance statement, and I offered to pen some thoughts there. And in Section 6, which is on page 46 of 282, which is the section that refers to the Ernst & Young independent governance report, I suggested that you may wish to add a statement such as, the independent governance audit and John Howe QC identified instances where the Council did not fully adhere to Principle 4 and 6 of the Local Code of Corporate Governance. The Independent Governance Audit's action plan addresses some of those issues, and further work will be progressed through the review of the Council's constitution. The recommendations and resultant action plan from the IGA will be added to the annual governance statement. And And in respect of that, the discussion we had at the time was that there are several recommendations from different sources that were identified as fundamental within the statement, and that you felt it was appropriate that those ones from the Ernst & Young document were also included, and that can be simply done, Chairman. Do you wish to take comment on that one, and then I...
Yeah, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Just to say, I think, first of all, Laura, thank you for the email, and thank you for doing the work on it. I appreciate the way you've worded it, and, you know, I can sit here and say the words but your words work. And from that point of view of capturing as a compromise what I think many of us, and I know me and Annalise around the table were pushing for, and what others were helping us to try to get to, I think that does capture it on both occasions, Vice Chair, actually. So I know what Laura's going to introduce the second paragraph, but in terms of both of those paragraphs, I think it more or less captures what I was pushing for. And then if those other elements are added in to the action plan, the appendices, the bit that goes afterwards, and I think again it kind of captures the direction of travel I know I was pushing in. So thank you, Laura, and if members are happy with that, I'm not going to fight for it again, then that's a good thing. But nonetheless, I think that's a good step forward, and thank you.
Thank you. Any others? You agree? Excellent. So we're done.
Shall I just run through the second one? And then the other item that you considered at the time was that the learning from the review of the procurement of the Independence Governance Report should also be included in the annual governance statement. And members, luckily, that's actually shown on page 6 of 282, because you considered that at your last meeting. So there are 7 points which you resolved for us to work on, and I simply propose that that's included to the action plan that you receive regularly. So the words for that are: a review of the procurement of the IGR was considered at ARGA on the 8th of April. The committee commented that lessons should be learnt from the review as the process of the procurement was not followed as it should have been. The 7 resolutions of the committee will be added to the Independent Governance Report action plan.
Any comments on that one, folks? Councillor Parker.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to say that when I read those particular 7 points, which are here on page 6, I was really pleased to see how they've been authored. And I was pleased, particularly, I draw attention to paragraph 5, that was a particular comment that I made, and I think it strengthens potential the future processes, is that in certain instances the appointment of a lead officer can be looked to be made from somebody outside this authority.
That point was well made when we came up with it, and I think that was a helpful reiteration. Any further thoughts on Councillor Keating?
First of all, as you'll be aware, I wasn't at the 24th of June meeting, and I had a number of points I would have made there had I been there now. Because we're effectively revisiting the subject matter, I'd like to take the opportunity to make a number of points about nature.
I'm going to say, I kind of feel it would be wrong not to, but I would encourage you to be brief.
Yes.
Go on then.
Thank you. Page 32 of 282, top of the page. It's item 6, taking active and planned approach to dialogue, etc., 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 and putting in place monitoring arrangement and ensuring that they operate effectively. I simply wanted to identify as a separate item that we do need a report or a record of when the webcast is working and when it breaks down. We need somewhere within the governance arrangements the mechanism by which it is reported to us, directly to us. I don't mean to the manager or somewhere else, to us of issues arising from the of the webcast, should it happen in the future.
I thought we actually discussed that very subject and agreed that we would have reports back to this committee. So, well, it may not have been on this paper, but it.
Okay, I think the matter is covered, and we will be having a report at the next meeting, we hope, on the progress of webcast reporting. So I think, again, the point is well made that we need to know when it's on and when it's off and what needs to be covered elsewhere. So thank you for that one. Next point. I agree, that's helpful. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Keating. That was brief. So in reverse order, can I take a view then that in terms of the recommendations 2.2 at the front of paper B, subject to our comments today and the inclusion of the wording that Mrs. Taylor shared with us, the annual governance statement for 2012-13 is approved by this committee. Just have some nod. Thank you. Okay, that takes us back to 2.1, and I said I'd have a go at some wording. So I'm now back on page 30 of 282. I'm going to look at number 7 first. We were okay with A. We had some issues with B. So I've separated that out now, and at B I've suggest that we leave that as ensure that career structures in place for officers to encourage participation and development. And then for C, ensure that training and support is in place for members to ensure that they're able to properly undertake their roles at full council and on committees. And just leave it at that. Sorry, you're mouthing something at me.
Sorry, Mayor Chairman. Forgive me just for interrupting there. I think the issue around council and on committee falls under little box 6 here, because that's around governance, whereas I think this phrase is about your role in totality. So I think it's to be an effective councillor, because there may be something in ward support or
okay,
something like that.
So if I just take the end bit off there, so that ensure that training support is in place to ensure that to enable members. Ensure that training support is in place so that members are able to properly undertake their role as members. And leave it as that. That's much more explicit. Oh, go on then.
To undertake properly.
I bow to your judgment on that one. Thank you. I'm happy with undertake properly. I'll put it on the other way. I'm not going to make any comment on that one. In terms of item 6, I'm just picking up where Councillor Keating was coming from, and this is in relation to governance. So separating out C into C and a D. So again, C is ensuring that effective arrangements are in place for reviewing the performance of, and that will become Cabinet as a whole, and individual members, and agreeing an action plan which might, for example, aim to address any training or development needs. So that is specific to members. And then the insertion of a D, and again you have to help me with this one if it captures your thinking. Ensure that effective arrangements are in place to enable officers to support executive and members in identifying training and support requirements and delivering that training and support as required. So there's 2 separate thrusts to that. Councillor Harvey, you got something to add?
Just on the first section, in terms of the executive as a whole, I'm just conscious of the fact that a number of the executive have very specific functions, for example, the planning function. Therefore, would it not be appropriate to put in the reference to individual as well as a whole? Because obviously, while not reviewing the individual as the person, but reviewing the role and their effect in the role and so on would be appropriate, particularly if you're doing a full governance and capacity and looking at them as a... So it's not just the cabinet as a whole, yes, and portfolio holders.
So ensure there are effective arrangements in place for reviewing the performance of the cabinet as individuals and as a whole. Right. Okay. So in terms of recommendation paper B 2.1, subject to the points that Kevin outlined with us earlier and the additions we've just made to page 30 and Councillor Keating's comments, we are content to go forward. Yep, agreed. Thank you very much, folks. Right, that's paper B done. That takes us on paper E, which is the draft statement of accounts. I will ask, yes, thank you, Mr. Taylor can leave us now. I'll ask Kevin to introduce this paper.
Thank you, Chair. This is, as you say, this is the draft statement of accounts. We're bringing it to committee this year in line with best practice, so that you get to see the draft accounts prior to, you will see the final accounts in September meeting, and you will also get the external audit report at that point as well, before being asked to approve the accounts in September. So these are draft accounts, and as I say, they will be amended slightly as they go forward. They're currently subject to audit, and audit's about 3 weeks into its 4-week audit, and the accounts cover the usual areas really. It covers the statement of accounts, the statement of income, comprehensive income and expenditure, the balance sheet, the reserve statement, the cash flow, and then there are a range of notes that take up the bulk of the statement. So really it was just to provide sight to members of the statement of accounts and to answer any questions at this stage really.
Okay, members, over to you for any questions on paper E. No, I'm not seeing any hands going up, so if we don't have a... Councillor Leake.
Sorry, which bit are we looking at? The actual report or the appendix?
I was looking to take the entire paper in one go. If you wish to cite, obviously logically, if you have questions, it would be helpful to take the report before we take the appendix, but I was just trying to encourage a signposting of any wish to ask questions at this point.
I had a meeting with Kevin. I made that quite clear on both the papers, and I did give some comments, which I have to assume have been incorporated. Otherwise, he would. I beg your pardon? Yeah. No, exactly. So I was just wondering.
Yeah, I'm aware. Yeah, if you fed back comments, they won't have gone into the paper as yet. But that's what we're trying to do today, is to make sure there's anything.
I have to say, Chairman, some of them were trivial, like commas.
Yes.
But others were less trivial. But I'm happy to raise them all again. But it does seem a bit of a waste of time.
Please don't raise the grammar and spell check ones with us, if that's Are there several points of principle you wanted to pick up or in question?
Well, it's my old bête noire, I suppose, where we talk about approved budget. because the approved, and I know it's not going to be changed, but one day we'll get there, and hopefully at some stage approved budget will mean the budget which we actually approve in February of the previous year, not the budget that gets nudged up so that it meets the outcome later on, which all that does is to prove how good we are at bookkeeping and altering the budget. So that's I just wish to put that on record for about the 10th time. I'll allow somebody else to.
Thank you. I'm aware that it's a familiar comment, and the point is taken. I saw Councillor Harvey and Councillor Keating. So, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. I found my page. 211 and 282. We spoke about it in the informal, but I just, for my benefit, forgive me, Kevin, would you just talk me through where we get to a number of these points? I'm looking at the revaluation in terms of Festival Place, the revaluation in particular of the Hounds Mills Industrial Estate, and then the revaluation of the malls, because I'm trying to track it and I'm trying to understand how you've done what you've done, and forgive me, I don't. So I'd really appreciate if you can unpack that for me. I would benefit from that.
I'll try, Chair. That note to the accounts there on page 211 to 282, significant revaluation, shows the revaluation, the main revaluations for the investment property that occurred in 12-13, and it shows as a comparison what the revaluations were in 11-12. So if you take the 12-13, for example, and take Festival Place, what that's showing is that the value given to the council's lease arrangements with Festival Place has gone up by 1.8 million. So that's the valuation change there. And when in 11-12, the valuation position had gone up by 1 million. So, and that valuation change is a result of a change in the lease structure following the assignment of the lease. So there was an action or a change that's led to a valuation change. Danes Hill Industrial Estate, similarly, that's been no, it's Hounsmill. You said was it Hounsmill? Well, either of them. Those are all of the investment properties valued each year, and what that will do will take a look at the rental streams, and then we'll apply a value to those rental streams. So in those instances, the value assigned to those properties has gone up in both those instances. So Danes Hill gone up by 1 million and Hounsmill by 382,000. Those are the valuations that have gone up. And then there are valuations that have gone down. You mentioned the Mals. So the Mals valuation is down just under 3.2 million on where it was valued at the end of 11-12. And that's a factor of two things, or probably in this instance 3 things actually. One is vacant units or non-vacant units, the level of income and future projections of income streams that are done to value. The other one is obviously the council's been incurring capital expenditure on the refurbishment, where that capital expenditure doesn't lead to a pound for pound increase in value, then you see a valuation change, which is what's occurred here. And there was a slight error in the accounts in 11-12 that I'd overvalued the MALs, so that's been reflected out as well. So there are three issues on the MALs.
Forgive me if this sounds really stupid, but am I reading it then that some of the expenditure on the malls has actually resulted in a depreciation of the value of the malls?
Not necessarily a depreciation in the value. The value hasn't gone up by the value of the expenditure. So if the value was the same after making the capital expenditure as before, then all of that because what happens in terms of the valuation is you have a value when you spend the capital expenditure. The assumption is that the value of the asset will go up by the level of capital expenditure. So you would have capital expenditure added to the previous year value to get a new value. But obviously what the valuers do is go back to basic principles and revalue. They then do a value based on rental streams, compare one with the other, and we say, well, we've got an accounting increase in value or decrease in value. And in this instance, it's a decrease.
give me in terms of explaining, without going into tremendous detail, I appreciate, but nonetheless setting out for whoever may read the accounts of is there an explanation that is given at some point? Is there some reference made to the reason why we see these figures? Because they are such variations. It's not as if they're small amounts. These are quite significant variations. And surely somewhere, someone, rather than just accepting the table, here's a table of figures, there should be something with it that says, and this is the reason why, members, or this is the reason why, reader.
No. Go ahead, Phil.
I mean, it's all very valid, but the other matter which Councillor Harvey might want to ask is, if we were unable to settle with the weights at the figure which we believe is correct, then there could be an even higher write-down. So, these are matters which are of importance, and we've already written the MELs down in these 2 years by 5.5 million, and we have no certainty as to the absolute amount which we might have to pay.
So I think it's looking at some commentary behind the table that doesn't come through explicitly in the paper, and to actually understand when we get to a position of almost final valuation change.
Well, it's a good point. It's two things. One, I think we could probably give some more commentary in future in the covering reports on valuation changes. I think that's a fair point. We can try and include. We've included this note in the statement this year, which wasn't in last year's statement, but we can certainly give some more narrative around the covering report, which would, I think, help members. But in terms of readers of the accounts, we would, at the moment, under significant movements and events on page 200, there's a general reference to changes in investment property values, but there isn't a specific reference to any one valuation change. Normally, as I say, we would only comment on something that's material, but I think 3.2 million is getting close to our materiality level in terms of this statement. So I think I would agree with Councillor Harvey there in that we could accounting materiality in terms of the balance sheet. In terms of the notes, I think we probably could look to if that's what the committee want, we could look to expand that note on page 200 just to give a little bit more narrative to the reason for that valuation change, if members are happy with that.
No, thank you, Kevin. I would like to see it item by item, just from the point, this is my final point, simply because, as John rightly says, and as we've picked up in other places, if it's that significant on one, that must be accounted for. And it's the openness and transparency bit, that's all I'm looking for, that it is clearly identified, and I can point to it and say, look, here is where we've said it is, and this is the reason why it's 697 million. Yeah, indeed, very much so.
So I think we've got a comment generally going forward in terms of where there are significant or material changes in a particular table. There's more commentary that goes with that table, but specific to this paper, expanding the narrative on page 200 already to take account of this sort of material change. Councillor Keating, you were next.
Thank you, Chair. I think this particular box on page 211, on top of the page, I think it's very interesting and it is informative to an extent. But as a layperson who is not an accountant, I would like to see a previous box prior to that, which said this is the actual valuation of the actual property of Festival Place. This is the reduction in the value thereof. That would be much more informative to lay readers of such accounts. Because to compare last year's reduction in the valuation to this year's reduction in the valuation is not as clear to lay readers of such an arrangement. So I'm not saying it hasn't a value, it does. I'm saying it would be even more valuable if it was preceded by the actual valuation of the particular property.
Thank you. Would that be possible, Kevin?
All things are possible, Chair. Yes, I think we could look to amend that note for the key. I mean, only for the current year, so for the 12-13 figures, not for the prior years, because otherwise the table's going to get too messy. But if we had under the 12-13, we would have start valuation, end valuation, and then you'd have your column that you've got there, valuation change. If you're happy with that for the 12-13, then I think we can obviously we can do that.
That's helpful, thank you. We've got Councillor Gardner and then Councillor Parker. Oh, sorry. Thank you, go on.
So I am following properly. I mean, I don't know, you don't need a start figure, do you? You talk about what the revaluation is, and then it's what the change figure is.
However you want.
Well, you've got, everything else is in there. Otherwise, again, it starts to become over-informative.
Yeah, I think that the point is we need a real number that you can put the variance against. Yeah, okay, that's helpful, thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Also on that point, it is useful to know the percentages by which we have written it down. So if we have the original figure, we can see what the relationship is, rather than just have a single figure. But in terms of many down, and I know this has come up many times, what is the basis of the valuation that is included currently, and should we actually state that that is a restrictive valuation and any alternative valuation could come up with a significantly higher figure?
I think we put the note on there that explains the basis of the valuation. Remember, this is the value for the circumstances and at the balance sheet date. So though it talks there about the restrictions on the disposal of the council's interest in the Hampshire County Council option on 50% of the interest. So I think the restrictions are specified there. I'm not sure that there's anything further we could add, Chair.
What we've got there is an investment property, an investment in agricultural land, an investment in a potential development site. What exactly are we using as the basis of valuation?
The basis is the value of the land in the market. So it's a market valuation, or attempted to be a market valuation, taking account of known circumstances. So it's done by an external. This particular valuation is done by an external valuer, based on what the valuations are meant to be. What is the market value of the land in terms of the circumstances that are available?
Councillor
I
Lee.
mean, what is stated in these accounts was correct on the 24th of June. But of course, on last Thursday, we approved the local plan, and therefore that site is now subject to the inspection, is available for development. So should there not now be a post-balance sheet comment to say that on the something of July, the council approved its pre-submission local plan, as a consequence of which, many down, da.
Yeah, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Jeff. Very much want to support John and Roger and what they're saying on this one, and what others have said as well on this in the past. I think just as thought on this, I can't escape, and I don't understand this, Kevin, I really don't, and it would be on the basis of what you gave the independents. I mean, I know Mike Bovis has done the other ones, and I have an issue around the independence of that anyway, but on this particular one, yeah, we did put it out for independent, but they would have been instructed, and they're instructed to look at it in a particular way. Now, if we purchase the land for the purposes of planning in the context of the original Town and Country Planning Act, you cannot escape its development value, set a land its land value. So I think, but in that context, what I can't see and what I don't know is whether, the point that John's making needs to be adjusted now, therefore the change. And I think in the context of what it should have been valued as, I find the figures strange. Now, I just wanted to understand that as to when and where those changes take place in the context of what it should say.
I could say we don't instruct the valuer in terms of how they value it. That's their role. They value it according to RICS standards or whatever, so they follow a evaluation process. And they obviously were aware of the council's draft local plan proposals, so they've had all of the relevant information, and they value it and they discount back for the risk that there is around the site until there is a local plan, approved local plan allocation, and then a detailed, there will be different stages. And as I said to you before, the valuation of the site will change as and when it progresses through the process. But they were aware of the relevant information. And the other thing I would say is the report, I think that we said that's coming back on Many Down, bringing all the issues together. One of the sections of that report will cover the basis of the valuation, because that was one of the things that members asked for in that report. So there would be more detail. Well, I think they've taken that information into account. We will look at that, but I think that information has been taken into account. So I wouldn't expect a change to the value for last year as a result of that.
Okay, what I'm trying to get to the bottom of there for this one in a minute, and I'll come back to Councillor Keating and Councillor Gardner are waiting to ask a question. Essentially, I'm trying to get to the bottom of the fact that we're dealing with the current report and the explanation about the basis of the valuation for the Many Down land. And I've heard some comment about that and some explanation around the use of the independent valuation on Royal Institute Chartered Surveyor standards, and I think we can sort of make sure the explanatory note is clear of that, although it is there. We will have the further opportunity to comment on that when the Many Down accounting paper comes forward at the next meeting. I'm just trying to bottom out at the moment the second comment around whether we need to amend this paper in relation to what happened last week, because I understand the point and I accept that. What I don't know is whether that's relevant to this paper or something we do in the future. So I'm just trying to understand. It's a when. Yeah, please.
I'm not suggesting that we change the valuation. I'm merely saying that in the post-balance sheet events section, we say that on the something of July, the Council approved the pre-submission local plan, as a consequence of which the Many Down land is in play, but you don't use the words in play.
Yeah, so it's a factual recording of what's happened since this, but yeah, fine. Okay, that's helpful, thank you. Is that on this point, Councillor Parker? Yeah, please.
Well, yes, Chair. I understand Councillor Leake's point regarding the change subsequent to the council meeting. But in purposes of this paper and these accounts, unless there's, and taking the politics out of it, unless there is something, a fundamental issue that I'm not grasping, I thought that the note under investment property held under leases and restrictions on disposals made it quite clear to me.
Okay, thank you. I think that's helpful, members. I've got Councillor Keating and then Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Chair. It's in relation to the valuation of Many Down that I speak. There are currently 2.5 property owners in Many Down. There's the Many Down Company, which owns 50%. There's the Hampshire County Council, which allegedly owns 25%, but hasn't yet paid. But probably will have by the time we've finished the week, or perhaps even next month, but it will have paid. So that's a second landowner. And of course we are the other 25% landowner. And I just wanted to ask then, if the other landowners take the principal valuation that we are using and agree with it, or how do we have 3 organizations with 3 different valuations? And if so, what are they? Thank you.
I'm not aware of any of the other valuations. We don't share the valuation with any of the other parties. This is a valuation of the council's ownership for its statement of account. So it's not a valuation that's used for anything else. It's an accounting valuation for the statement of accounts. It's our 50% valuation, until such time as the county produce an option. Exercise their option.
Councillor Gardner.
Just picking up on Sean's point, many down don't own it. They have a share of any development profits arising from development. But I don't argue at all with the valuation that's there. I don't argue with the words that are there in terms of what it says. But there is a restriction in that is based on the circumstances at that time. I think it is worth saying that were those circumstances to change, as they have done, that valuation could be appreciably higher. And that's all I'm saying at that point, that it is a restrictive valuation which does not encompass its long-term value.
Joe, I understand the point, and you're right. As I say, the valuation will change, but the valuers do take into account it is a value based on future development. So it's a value at that date based on the future development potential of the site in terms of the valuation, but discounted significantly for time over the time frame and risk. And what changes as you move forward potentially is the risk goes becomes more certain as the process goes forward, and therefore the value potentially and potentially the timing might change as well, and then the valuation will change. But it is based on the development potential of the site, but it's based on it has a large factor for infrastructure and risk.
Okay, thank you, members. I think we've done the table and paragraph at 211 do justice. Have we got other questions to move on to? Councillor Leake.
Two that I raised. One related to 3EN.
Can you guide us to
I can't remember which page, but it's somewhere. Basically, a decision was taken to close down 3EN. I don't know whether that work has been completed, and I don't know what the outcome was. But there are various references to 3EN, and I didn't think they were entirely appropriate. I raised that point. I can't remember where the devil they are. And well, really to ask Kevin whether it has now been closed, and what the consequences were, and whether I know it's probably de minimis in the context of these accounts, but I think we still ought to know what the outcome was. And then I've got a further question to ask about the pension.
I think I've got the same version as you here, but I think we clarified some of the wording around 3EN in the final statement, hopefully to reflect some of your comments about bringing it together. In terms of where the position is, that was, yeah. Yeah. That was in the related party transactions. I think we've mentioned it in terms of closing down 3EN, even though it occurred in April, so it occurred, or May, it included after the account date. We made more reference to it in the statement. I haven't got my list with me, but you'll see with when you see the September ones, hopefully that's been highlighted a little bit more. In terms of where the council is on that, yes, the structure has been closed down, and the process is ongoing at the moment of valuing the residual share ownership, and the intention is there will be a report through to members in September, as I understand it.
Please do.
I did raise the subject that on the pension scheme, and I should declare the interest that I am a member of the Hampshire County Council Pension Fund panel, and therefore some of the information I have probably only came about as a result of being a member of that. But this bit isn't. I expressed a little concern that we didn't seem to refer anywhere in the pension fund bit that 10 members, councillors, are within the scheme. And it did seem to me that that should be disclosed, partially because the government is undertaking a consultation. The government's wish being that members shouldn't participate in the pension scheme, and
Do you have a page for us?
well, I think
Councillor?
it's 220. Well, the pension bit's all on starts on 219. I raised these points, and I just wonder whether Kevin, I am, because we haven't seen a revised draft. I just felt that perhaps there should be some reference somewhere. It may not be under pension, but it might be under members' allowances or something, that there are some members who do participate in the pension scheme. The thing that I was a little surprised to find was that within Hampshire, about 5 or 6 authorities actually do not allow members to participate. Others do, and I would have to say members of the county council seem to use it as a means of supplementing their income. I didn't say anything like that. But my other point on the pension scheme was on the basis of the valuation, or and I can't remember which page this was on. I did ask that it be checked that the basis of the valuation was correct, because this seemed to refer, and I can't find the page. I do apologise for all of this, I'm rambling a bit, but basically we say that shares are valued at mid-market price and so and so and so and so. But there are some assets of the pension fund which weren't actually included within the categories set out in this paper. Because well, like all pension schemes, there's nothing wrong in it, but they have categories of investments which aren't just stocks and shares. They own properties, they own all sorts of things. And I just wanted to make sure that we had a comprehensive categorization for valuation purposes.
So, two questions there, Kevin. One referencing the membership of the pension scheme and whether or not members at this council actually declare their membership, and how's that reflected or referenced in the report, and the second one then about the basis of the valuation.
The membership of the pension scheme, I'll have to double check. I think we found a place to just make reference to it. I'll send something round to members so you've got, if we have made reference to it, you've got where we've made reference to it. But I think when I spoke, we found a sensible place to make reference. In terms of the valuations, we did check with the county, and I think all of the instruments that they used had bid offer prices. They were covered by the pricing that this methodology suggests. So there wasn't anything that wasn't covered, and we spoke to their pension section.
Councillor Keating and then Councillor Parker. Oh, right. Is yours on pensions, Councillor Parker? Thank you.
It's just on your comment with regard to whether members declare. In my sort of deliberation on the consultation, I did ask if I could get some indication of the membership from this local authority, because my understanding from the information that was provided by It was. We received some information that indicated, well, actually stated, that the 10 members membership of the pension scheme, the employer's contribution cost was 14,500 a year. And I wanted to sort of get a feel for what level of membership. And that information they said they were unable to provide that information. So my understanding is that the only need for any declaration would be to the Inland Revenue if they do a self-assessment. It would appear that there's no will to give that information out by the personnel department.
Councillor Gardner and then Councillor Leake.
First of all, I better declare an interest because I'm a member of the pension scheme. Do you want me to leave the room?
I was just going to say, if we're going to have any detailed discussion, I think it probably will be sensible to do so, because it seems that we're going off. Not that I want to follow down this route for any length of time, but this is not a discussion of the pension scheme and arrangements. But if we are going to have a discussion about the arrangements shortly, then it might be sensible to do so. We'll take Councillor Leake, and hopefully don't go too far away, because I don't think it'll take too long. But thank you.
I wasn't asking that we disclose it. I'm just saying that somewhere there should be a reference to some members some councillors are members of the pension fund, and the cost is included in members' allowances or something like that. I mean, I'm totally opposed to them being. Let me be quite honest. I think it's wrong. But I think we should tell everybody what it is costing this council for people to participate in.
Councillor Keating, do you want to say anything before I ask Kevin to respond?
My point that I was going to raise separately, which is obviously now relevant, is on page 230, item 20, top of the page. The note says the employee's remuneration and the employer contributions to the pension scheme are always excluded. Now, I think the one thing that is essential in all of these things is absolutely straightforward clarity and a straightforward position. If we're going to identify employees into contribution to the pension scheme as part of their remuneration package, then I think the same thing should happen for councillors and vice versa. I have no particular issue about this, by the way, because I do declare that I am not a member of the pension scheme for the councillors, but I do accept and I believe that I should and would continue and should continue to have the right to do so should I wish to do so. Thank you.
Okay, can you help us a little bit, Kevin?
I'll try to. In terms of disclosure for the statement of accounts, and remember this is the statement of accounts and not any other document, the page 229 covers note 19 covers members' allowances, and basically what that does is give a total figure and then reference the published information on members. So the members' allowances are dealt with there. The employee's remuneration, note 20, that's a statutory note. Its method of calculation is in accordance with regulations. So that gives across the entire council workforce the bandings at 50 and above. And then note 21 talks about redundancy and exit package. Note 22 talks about the separate disclosure requirement for senior employees, and that lists again by posts, salary, benefits in kind, but also pension payments. And again, that's a requirement of that note that pension payments are added into the figures, and that's why you get the difference. They are done differently. They're done correctly in accordance with what we need to do, but they are different between those two notes. And in terms of, sorry, just back to now, where we put the reference is I've now lost my page, but there is a note that talks about participation in the pension scheme, and that's where we made the reference to member participation as well.
Okay, we've got Councillor Parker and then Councillor Leake.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify then with the officer the figure of 569717. Does that incorporate then the employer's pension contribution of 14,500?
Going to have to double check that and get back to you.
Can I suggest if it doesn't, then the picking up on the point that's made by John is that that's where there should be some small reference. I'm not looking to name in any sense. It's just to try and, because we have from time to time, we received an email from one of the officers saying this is the schedule of members' allowances, including the basic allowance and travelling allowance pay that they were sending across to the local press. So if the local press look at that figure, then they look at this figure, and if there's a discrepancy, this would then be wrong.
I mean, I'll look and get back to you. I mean, again, those are all done in reference to the particular legislation that governs them. So we have to check to see whether the member's allowance statement is one that includes that pension payment or not. But I don't think it does, which is why it probably isn't in there. But I do need to double check.
I think what I'm hearing is a desire to show appropriately the cost of supporting a member contribution to a pension scheme, and it's no more or less than that. In terms of members' reference to interest, any time where the pension scheme is being discussed, then it is again, as with any other interest, for those members to declare it appropriately, as Councillor Gardner has just done. Councillor Leake, did you have a further comment? That's it. Fine. Are we comfortable with conclude on this paper? Okay. Yep. Well, we're going to get Councillor Gardner back now.
Just a comment, but not.
It's not about pensions, is it?
No. I did just note, if you look at page 218, in a period of austerity, this council received 10.1 million of grants from the government and only 9.6 in the previous year.
Point noted. If I go back to just before we sum up, the comments I picked up on was Councillor Leake's comments at the start, reference the budget when we refer to approved budget. His plea that it's actually the budget as set, not as it moves during the year. In terms of the value, we talked around. Well, first of all, we talked around the table in 211. And whether or not there can be further explanatory notes to tables where there are significant material changes. And we talked about whether that should be an actual value as a baseline within both a real change and a percentage change explicit alongside the initial actual value. We talked at length about the need perhaps for some further explanatory notes on the valuation of the Medidown estate. And raise the point as to whether or not there needs to be a postscript note in this paper in respect of the full council decision last week. Yes, post-balance sheet event. Yes.
That would come in on page 232 under para 23, post-balance sheet events.
Thank you very much. So that's where we need to post it. Thank you. We then talked about the closure of 3EN and how that is reflected in the accounts, given when that actually occurred, and then again a commentary to ensure that it is appropriately reflected as to when and the impact of that happening. We then spoke about the reference to the pension scheme. And again, just picking up the points there, in terms of members' interest, that's for them to identify and declare it as appropriate. What we did wish to see going forward was an explicit statement of the cost to this council of supporting membership of the pension scheme. And then a final comment about the pension valuation, a more explicit categorisation, and assurance that categorisation is comprehensive and complete. Subject to those comments, I take you back to the recommendation on this paper, and that's on 187 of 282. So it's recommended this committee notes the draft statement of accounts for the year ended 31st of March 2013, that there has been no changes to the council's accounting policies approved that year, and that, I think, concludes this paper. You happy, members? Okay. Heaven forbid I didn't actually mean you happy, because I didn't want to go that far, but can we move on at least to paper F, which is our Treasury Management Annual Report. And again, I'll ask Kevin to introduce this paper.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the outturn report for 2012-13 for the Treasury management activity. I'll just run through the key points. So the key element was an overall adverse variance on the budget of £382,000, and the report outlines that. The main reason for that was that long-term interest rates were very low during last year, so long gilt rates beyond a year were very low, much lower than was anticipated when the budget was set, which meant that to get a return above that we budgeted for, a 1.75 return, we need to have gone out well beyond 10 years, and the value in doing that wasn't there, in that shorter term rates were giving a similar level of return, not 1.75, but the short term rates were fairly close to gilt rates that were 5 years or 6 years. So it didn't make a lot of sense to invest longer term. When the council had money maturing, then that money, rather than being invested out longer term, was kept short term. So the short term balances have increased because reinvestment in the longer term has not occurred because of the level of the rates, and that meant that we obviously got more short term interest than we were budgeting for, but that didn't make up for the loss of what we had anticipated would be achieved through reinvesting long term. So that's the main reason for the adverse variance, and it's a key issue in terms of the council's treasury management investment, really, in that long-term rates are still very low, still projected to be very low, historically low, and over time you would expect those rates to go up. So there is an issue that the council has more short-term cash invested than previous policies and previous strategies would have dictated. So the report outlines that in a bit more detail, gives the short term and the long term, gives the overall position on the portfolio, which was that at the end of March last year there were total investments of about 140 million. In the year, the council had an average balance of about 150 million, and that's because it gets cash flow in from business rates and council tax, and then pays them over at the early part of the month and pays them over towards the end part of the month, so it gets a cash flow boost. And the overall credit rating in the portfolio was AA, so a fairly secure credit rating profile with just over 2.5 years average maturity, so length until all of the investments mature. There were various changes to the lending criteria which are detailed in the report, but largely the council's lending criteria has been restricted to UK banks, the large UK banks, and restricted to under a year for for all of those. All the policy and strategy and prudential indicator limits were met, and the report highlights the local authority mortgage scheme exception that council approved to the strategy, which was to make a longer term deposit with Lloyds as part of that scheme, and that's highlighted in the report. And sort of finally, really, and as you'll be aware, the council is looking at changes to its treasury management strategy and has appointed KPMG to assist in asset allocation recommendations and advice to the council. So there is a look at how the council may look to invest its strategic cash longer term or in different asset classes, and that's a piece of work that's will be ongoing through the summer and will come back again to this committee, well, certainly before the end of the calendar year, probably a couple of times, to be honest. So the report isn't a decision report; it's a report to be noted, and I think the report's probably already gone on to council now at the last council, but it's a report that goes on to full council as part of the reporting to council. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, I've got Councillor Keating for questions. I think the point was as well, when I ran through the agenda earlier on for the next meetings, we will be getting the Treasury Management Strategy and Treasury Monitoring Report, so there's opportunities for us to comment in more detail at those points. Councillor Keating, do you want to kick us off?
Thank you, Chair. I have been a long time supporter of the approach adopted by the Borough Council in terms of investing its money over the years as a member of this committee, and it's been admirable in terms of how they do it and what they do and what the returns they have made over the years. However, the recent events have shown that we can now invest in coffee shops on the basis that it gets more money than the banking sector can provide by investing there. I know, for example, that if we invested in building council houses, we'd get a 5% return. If we invested in climate change issues, we would get a 9% return. So I would be an advocate of looking at controlled investment in other sectors, especially those that would benefit our electors directly and not necessarily external sources other than outside the council. But because we can now do it in coffee shops, we can now build council houses, in my view, and we can now invest in climate change. So I'd suggest that that be put on the agenda for the future. Thank you.
I hesitate to ask, is the question there something we would consider for the Treasury Management Strategy? That's, yeah, thank you.
At the moment, no. In terms of the Treasury Management Strategy is about its cash investment. That doesn't mean that the council can't look at different options for its strategy longer term. But in terms of Treasury Management Strategy for the invested cash, then those asset classes are not ones that have been looked at specifically as part of the Treasury Management activity. Indeed, there are alternative options for the council to look at how it wishes to invest in the future. This is the Treasury Management Strategy, and the Treasury Management advice is looking within the Treasury Management parameters. There's a separate piece of work that's looking at the council's property investment strategy, for example, its commercial property portfolio. That's a separate piece of work that's being looked at. So in terms of Treasury Management Strategy, those wouldn't have been areas that would automatically be looked at.
Councillor Keating?
If I might, Chair, you invest the Treasury, what's in the Treasury, after you've invested elsewhere. So you always have a bit of cash left. Whether it be, in this case, 150 million, or next year's case might be 10 million. I understand that. So I'm not suggesting that we control anything other than you have a policy for Treasury management. What I'm saying is you reduce the amount of stuff that the Treasury management policy applies to because you invest the money elsewhere. We're already doing that. We're investing in a coffee shop. If we can invest in a coffee shop, we can invest in council houses. And I'm suggesting as a member of this committee that that should be an issue to be addressed as part of the future management of investments, not just treasury investments. Thank you.
Yep, I think that point is well made, and I think it's something that will be considered as we go forward in looking at the investment strategy and treasury management strategy, not in isolation, but holistically in how we use our money. Yeah, I take that point. I've got Councillor Leake next, and then Councillor Gardner.
I'm not sure this committee actually is the committee to decide whether we invest in council houses or other things. I would have thought that was probably EPP or something of that sort. I mean, I share your view. I mean, to invest in a coffee shop was an appalling mistake in my view. And I don't support it at all, but that's another matter. I don't think it's for here. I hear what you're saying, Councillor Keating, but I'm not sure that this is the committee that deals with that. This is the Audit, Governance and Accounts, and I share some of your views, as I often do, and I hope you share some of mine. The point I just wanted to make is that I remember not that long ago, someone on this committee actually suggested we should be putting our money in the co-op, and I just want to congratulate officers at the co-op bank, that was, just to congratulate officers for ignoring that good advice, because we'd be in a fair deal mess now. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think I take the point that this wasn't a suggestion that we were going to make any decisions on it, but we were looking for an influence of future strategy, and I think that's where the point feeds in. Yeah, I've got Councillor Gardner and then Councillor Shaw.
I think there probably is some relevance to this committee because we are responsible for the accounts, and if we can say that we probably think that at the moment there is too much money in the treasury strategy earning low rates of return, we should be looking to put it somewhere else in non-cash assets, and that's exactly what this review is going to be looking at. But yeah, it's our committee that should have some input in that. The coffee shop did come out of a specific pot of money that had been allocated. I think it was originally about something about $1 million, and 800,000 of that was allocated to the coffee shop. And I'm glad to hear that Councillor Keating supports the investment, because I think actually a 9% return is quite a good.
9% return.
So I think the 9% return is actually a very good return on our money, whether or not that was the right pot to take the money from in the first place.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Parker.
Staying with reference to the report, if I can, Chair.
Please
As
do.
interesting as coffee shops are and the like. On page 270, I just wanted to explore the table under 7.2 and the commentary that comes from that on 7.3, but particularly 7.4. Where 7.3 talks about the council's aim of being in the top left corner of the chart, low risk, high return, and 7.4 talks about the benchmarking shows the snapshot of the average running yield being over the council's running yield being 2.2%. Where else, everywhere in the report, it talks about in returns on investments falling short of expectations and draws attention to the potential low yields on returns on investments. Is this perhaps a little bit artificial in the sense that it's saying, whilst this is the benchmarking on average running yields, and it differs from the annual performance? I don't see how on annual performance we are top left-hand corner.
I think that was just trying to explain the reason why 2.2 could be different to the actual 2.14 return. But I think the point about that table, I think, is actually good news in terms of the council's investment, and you give me an opportunity to express that, in that if you look at Appendix 3, page 279, that shows the benchmarking, and it shows the credit quality and the returns, and it shows that would be if you drew those quadrants on that diagram, the council's returns are higher than most councils' returns at a lower level of risk than most councils. So we're towards that top left-hand box. So it's a good level of return with a low level of risk. And that's because the council invests beyond a year in gilts. It takes duration. It invests longer term for a significant proportion of it. But I think that is a point for members to be aware of, that whilst the return was lower than we budgeted for, and it was, and that is in the report and it's explained in the report, it is still a return that is probably double the average that most councils are getting from their pure treasury investment. And that's because of the strategic decisions and the previous strategy that the council adopted. So I think there is some good news there, and it's at a low level of risk.
But in the debate and the discussion, Chair, we've identified, and other members have drawn attention to in different other committees, that there are better returns to be had from other areas of investment. And this point that I'm making is that this shouldn't be just looked at in isolation of the investments that we hold right now, because in terms of general return on investment, 3% isn't even high. And so I don't believe we can qualify saying that we are low risk, high return in the general sort of use of money. That's the point I'd just like to make. I mean, I'm not. I think it's been identified that we could and that we should be more proactive at looking at other means and ways of investing any monies that are available to invest. That can give a low risk, higher return, and can also be of indirect, if not only direct, not direct, benefit to our ratepayers.
I think we've got a consistent theme that has come across in all the points made this afternoon, and I think again it's something we'll have the opportunity to pick up, if not in September, then certainly in our October meeting when we look at the Treasury Management Strategy. It's something certainly we've taken time and energy to look at over the past 9 months when we've discussed the investment approach and our risk appetite. So I see this being a continuing theme, and look forward to some healthy discussion about the potential solutions and direction of travel. Anything further, members, on this paper? If I take you back then to the recommendations, that we note the report, and certainly our comments in noting it relate to where and how we can seek a better return across a wider portfolio of potential investments without exposing us to unnecessarily higher risk. Okay, thank you, members. That brings us to the end of our papers for today, and to the end of our re-adjourned meeting. So with that, I thank you for your attention and engagement, and thank you for the meeting. Close the meeting. Bye-bye.